Alrighty, hello, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have the window open, so sorry if you hear the random noises. There's currently birds outside my window, but welcome back to another video on the hardships of women deal with in the US. Now, of course, I've stated this I think a couple times before, but I'm specifically only talking about the US because I live in the US, not because women in the US are the only ones that have problems. This is specific to my research for a senior project that I'm continuing on. This is the fourth video that I am in the middle of creating, and today we're going to be talking about women in war. So typically women in military times, women who are fighting on the front lines, and just women like in the Navy and what else is there? The Army, the Air Force, the Marines. I forgot about them. But yeah. Of course, today we have our drinks with us for once. I'm currently drinking Bloom. This is nothing else. Can't say it. I'm not sponsored or anything. I just like drinking the drink. It's very yummy. So let's get started. I have my research here, and so we're going to talk about it. So, women in America at war. This is an overall deep dive into their contributions and the overall struggles women have had to deal with when facing timely matters. Women have often played vital roles in every American conflict, from the Revolutionary War to modern military. While often overlooked, their contributions have been very much essential. As nurses, spies, soldiers, pilots, factory workers, and in fact, leaders. Over time, women have fought for the right to serve, face discrimination, and have broken barriers, shaping the overall what the US military is today, actually. So let's first talk about the Revolutionary War, which is from 1775 to 1783, which we're going to talk about how women were in combat and in espionage, which is actually really cool. So the roles women would often have was camp followers, nurses, camp followers, spies, and combatants in disguise. So for camp followers, there would be women who would be cooks, laundresses, and nurses to provide those overall essential support, so the men didn't have to deal with that, as they were the ones going onto the front lines and facing the British. And then they were also used as spies because they were seen as invisible during figures of war, and they were used to gather overall most intelligence for the Patriots, aka America. And then even some women disguise themselves as men to go fight in battle. Kind of like Mulan or a drag king. Iconic. They probably didn't have drag kings back then. I wouldn't be surprised. Hold on, actually. When was the first drag king? Who was the first? The late 1800s. So, yeah. I need these. If you can't tell, I'm currently fighting allergies, and it's not a good idea to have my window open, but I don't care right now. So yeah, these were the key figures. Deborah Sampson, who disguised herself as a man, named herself Robert Shirtliff. Anyways, and fought over a year before being actually discovered, and she was honorably discharged and awarded a military pension. So they didn't like kill her or anything. They just were like, "Thank you for your service." That's respectful, man. And then there was an agent that was Agent 355, who apparently played a crucial role in the Colbert spy ring and actually helped George Washington defeat the British. So, but this was a mysterious woman. They still don't know to this day who she is, but she's an icon, so it's okay. And then Margaret Corbin, when her husband was apparently killed in battle, she took his place at the cannon and was later the first woman to ever receive a military pension. Good for you, man. I'm jealous. I wish. Okay. Those were often some of the more memorable women of the Revolutionary War, but they're not the only women out there who have been very much honored. There are several women everywhere. I don't know where I was going with that statement at all, actually. But we continue on and looking forward. And now we're going to talk about the Civil War, which is another very much historical war. These are all historical wars. It's Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Korean and Vietnam Wars, and then all of our more modern wars. I don't know. But, yeah. But let's talk about the Civil War really quickly. So the Civil War was from 1861 to 1865, which was the North and the South going against each other for the abolishment of slavery. The South still wanted slaves, I believe, to work under them, and then the North wanted to abolish it. The North won, and yeah, so it basically was very much similar to how politics are kind of today, with both dividing sides on how the government should run and treat people. But it's obviously changed since we don't have slavery anymore. Yeah, except for prison labor. Anyways, during the Civil War, women often stepped up as nurses, spies, and even combatants, again, on both sides. Very, very prominent to say on both sides, since I don't know why, but people like to be weird about the Civil War and say it was not helpful. I don't know how to feel about that, but whatever. Basically, they would be very much the backbone of freaking battlefield medicine. They were the ones helping, healing, making sure. I don't think they were cutting off limbs, but I'm pretty sure they were helping wrapping limbs if they got amputated. I don't know if they were cutting them off. But spies and saboteurs, I totally said that wrong, but people who sabotage. Women often use their social status and perceived as innocent to gather more intelligence on the other side. I would totally love to see, I wonder if there's a movie about it, but I would love to see a woman, like a movie about a woman who is on both sides actually, whose husband has one side, who believes on one side, she believes on the other side, but because she wants to understand both sides of the war, she gathers evidence from both sides and then just kind of, like, she's still gathering evidence for the other side. But that sounds really interesting now that I'm thinking about it, and if I find a movie like that, I'm so gonna watch it later. I don't think it exists, but I would love to read it. Not read it, watch it. Yeah. And then disguised soldiers, and then again, they would disguise as men and then enlist to fight. Women love to do random stuff. It's just what we do. I feel like people need to know this. Excuse me. But yeah, a lot of women, often what I've seen as much of a pattern until women were actually allowed to enlist in the military, they would actually disguise themselves as men and enlist in the military. Which, valid, because it gets you something to do. They give you food, they give you clothes, you just have to do basic chores. Yeah, sounds like the life, except you might have to give your life in a minute, but whatever. We always give our life to something. Anyways, so the key figures of the Civil War actually was Clara Barton, was the angel of the battlefield. She often treated wounded soldiers and was later founded the American Red Cross. So hopefully in a future video, I can actually talk about the American Red Cross and the history behind it, because that's actually really cool. And I love talking about women-founded businesses and everything. I try to do a little bit of research on everything. At the same time, it's a little bit difficult to do some research just because of some evidence and all these things that might get me banned, and I don't really feel like getting banned. However, again, this is for an entire research project, and this is just spreading awareness. Okay, and then we have, of course, Harriet Tubman, who not only did she lead enslaved people to freedom, but she also worked as a spy and scout for the Union Army, leading military raids in the South. She's literally, we all know her, love her. We've learned about Harriet Tubman since elementary school. She is one of those historical people, I think elementary school. I remember learning about her in like 4th grade, I think, when we were learning about the Americans, the world as we know it. Anyways, I also just did not pay attention in class, so maybe, I don't know. And then we have Sarah Edmonds, who disguised herself as Franklin Thompson to fight with the Union Army and later became the only woman recognized as a Civil War veteran. That is an accomplishment. Congrats to you. Also, I want to point out, don't mind this and that down there. I have candles going because I'm trying to get rid of the candles because I want to buy more candles, except I have to limit myself because our economy sucks right now and I'm trying to save money. But at the same time, I spend it like nobody's business and I really need to stop. Anyways, now we're going to move on to World War I, which is from 1917 to 1918. So this is like 2 years before the 19th Amendment. So women still aren't allowed to vote during World War I, but they were allowed to work in factories. Seems weird, if I'm asking. So this was basically the first official military rules for women, so actual military rules, and they didn't really have to disguise themselves, but they still did because men suck ass, but not really. So they were obviously nurses. Over 20,000 women served as military nurses and treating injured soldiers in field hospitals. So like field hospitals, they're like tents basically, and you set them up and there's bandages and like antiseptics. What are they called? Stuff to clean your wounds. I don't remember the word. That's a bad thing to know. Anyways, they basically just had everything medically equipped during these times, like the time that you could have the medicine, and they used it. Basically, this obviously, as we know, was the first time during a war that the military officially recruited women ever. So this was a huge breakthrough, especially for the pathway towards women and getting that equality and that equity with men. And then a thing called Hello Girls, which I do want to talk a little bit more about that, hopefully in a later video as well, was the Army Signal Corps, which hired female telephone operators to help coordinate battlefield communications in France. So like people who talk over the phone, who are talking about battle plans and talking about where to raid next and all these things and making sure the war is going the way that they want it. Those are who those ladies are. And of course, we all know it and we all love it. The factory and war industry workers, which we've all known was a big thing because women typically did not work in the factories at all. They would sometimes work in the textile mills, but they did not work with like steel and building things until now. So they basically, while the men were at war, women would work in mutinous factories, shipyards, and offices. So they basically would do men's jobs while the men were out at war because obviously during this time everyone was getting drafted who was legally there or sometimes illegally drafted or sometimes illegally signing up even though they were not of age yet. Awkward. And then of course we have World War II. World War II is an iconic time. So World War II is from 1941 to 1945. Women, basically, this was like huge. This was like women were not being able to vote. This was like 20 years after they could vote finally. And like they're getting more of the recognition that they deserve. And they're icons. Literally iconic. I love women. If you can't tell, I feel like you can kind of tell just by how my room looks, but whatever. Basically, during World War II, 350,000 women served in the U.S. military. Women also took over millions of jobs in factories, shipyards, and government offices. So basically, they had a military service during World War II. So they had the WACs, which is Women's Army Corps, which were women served as clerks, mechanics, radio operators, and nurses. And then you had WAVES, which is Women's Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service. So women in the military, women in the Navy worked in aviation, intelligence, and medical fields. And then you have WASPs, which stands for Women's Air Force Service Pilots. And so these were basically female pilots that flew military aircraft from transport supplies and trained male pilots, actually, which was very impressive. And then you had SPARS, which is Coast Guard, Coast Guard Women's Reserve, which is basically women who worked in the Coast Guard handling administrative and intelligence tasks. And then during the factory and war efforts, with millions of men at war, women worked in factories, building tanks, airplanes, weapons, and then Rosie the Riveter became the symbol of working women during the war. So Rosie the Riveter is not a real woman. She is a symbolic figure. She actually inspired millions of women to go join the war effort, which is so cool and so interesting. I really want to do kind of like more of an in-depth video on World War II. I might have to ask a certain... You have Ovida Culp Hobby, which was the first director of the Women's Army Corps, so the WACs. So she was the head of WAC. It's such a weird name. WAC. Anyways, and then you have Nancy Harkness Love and Jacqueline Cottran, they were the founders of the WASP program, which allowed women to fly military aircraft. So they really fought for women to be able to fly the military aircraft and, work on the military aircraft, because we want some female flyers in here. But yeah, my favorite small piece of history that I ever learned, for no reason, it's literally just my favorite thing in the entire world, and I love it so much, and it's so iconic, and I want to do it, is Hitler despised makeup with a burning passion, especially red lipstick. And the fact was, so many people on the Allied side, not the Axis side, women wore red lipstick, and that's iconic. And they had stuff like Victory Red and just all of these military names for their lipsticks, and that's so cool to me, because you're that petty that you hate makeup. Bro, makeup's cool. You're just mad because you can't wear makeup, otherwise you'd be judged at. A little twink. Say this about dead man. That's funny. Anyways, okay, and then we have the Korean and Vietnam Wars. So this was more expanding the horizon of military roles for women, actually. So during these wars, women often took way more active roles, but still faced discrimination, quite a bit. So there were obviously nurses and medical personnel. We've always seen that within history. Women often are still part of those caregiver roles that we've seen. So they would be serving in combat zones. This is nurses, often actually under fire. That's scary, terrifying. And then they were also journalists and war correspondents. I still have spit on my computer. Oh my gosh, that's so gross. Okay, so women covered the wars despite opposition from the military. So they would talk about it, even though the military would be don't talk about it. That's so gross. Don't. This is not your war. And then they also started becoming advisors and intelligence officers. So women played very much key roles in military intelligence and advising local populations. So making sure that local populations are understanding what's going on, and if needing to evacuate a certain area because of the wars, they can evacuate the certain area. And then we have two key figures from this time, which is Colonel Annie Graham, who was the first female colonel of the U.S. Army Nurse Corps. So she's part of the Nurse Corps, which makes her head nurse. And then you have Elizabeth, or Liz Holtzman, who became one of the first female war correspondents reporting from Vietnam. So this was not during the Korean War, but instead the Vietnam War. Very impressive. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the modern wars. They're not that crazy. We all know them. We've all understood them. Women in combat are crazy. Now, officially today, women are allowed in any sort of branch of military, including combat roles. They have finally been accepted and allowed. Finally, after hundreds of years. How old is? We're almost what? We're 248 years old. We are 248 years old. Oh my gosh, I'm so smart. Okay, so very much key moments in women's military history was 1991, which is the Gulf War, And so women often started serving combat support roles, providing their capabilities in war zones. So they weren't fully combat, but they had, like, they could go out into the field and basically provide help when needed to their fellow troops, army recruiters. Yeah. And then, oh my gosh, wait, really? So in 2013, this is literally 12 years ago. 12 years ago, the U.S. officially lifted the ban on women in combat, allowing women to serve the frontline roles. So far, it's only been 12 years since they lifted this ban. And only 12 years. Oh my God. Scary. And then in 2015, women became eligible for all military roles. So this included special forces like Army Rangers and Navy SEALs. So this was only just 10 years ago. That's crazy. So obviously we still have our challenges women face today in the military, which is sexual harassment and assault. We always know this. It has been a huge part, which is very sad, but it's in military culture. You always hear at least one from a camp, like a boot camp, oh my gosh, of a woman being assaulted or raped or molested or something. So there has been several reports of sexual violence and discrimination, which is very high in the military, as people often see the military as more of a man's job rather than a woman's job. And then there are several promotion barriers for women in the Army still. So they're still less likely to get promoted for top ranks, even though they have shown probably the exact same skill as their male colleagues. And then combat role controversy. Some people often argue that allowing women in combat weakens unit cohesion. However, many studies have actually shown otherwise, showing that there is actually a little bit more organization and that things seem to be a bit more calm when it comes to going into war with women. It's very interesting. So we have a few key figures. So you have General Anne E. Dunwoody, which was the first female 4-star general in U.S. history. That's really impressive. I don't know the general rankings of the stars. I know there's like 3-star, 2-star, 1-star. I don't know if it goes up to like 5-star. I think it goes up to a bunch of stars, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if it went up to 10-star. But anyways, and then Lieutenant Kristen Grest and Captain Shay Haver were the first women to actually graduate from the U.S. Army Ranger School, which this was in 2015. So this was much more recent than like the Vietnam Wars. And then you have Captain Rosemary Mariner. I feel like I'm saying that completely wrong, but okay. Who became one of the first female Navy fighter pilots. Very impressive. Women have often played a very crucial role in the American wars, from spies into the Revolution to fighter pilots in modern conflicts. Despite facing discrimination, exclusion, and danger, they often pushed their very own boundaries and changed the military forever. Now, women actually can serve in all combat roles, but challenges still remain. Equal opportunities, safety from harassment, and leadership representation. As the next generation of women warriors emerge, their fight is not just on the battlefield, but also for true equality in the services. Often, we will always see women fighting for something, either equal pay or something like this. And as always, there is always going to be a link down below if you or a family member is currently seeking or currently being used against or having harassment from. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining today's video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.